Welcome modelers, TrekWorks here again with another Star Trek model kit review and build. In my last video I mentioned that I wanted to do the 1000 refit Enterprise, and I forgot that about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago I bought these two kits at a local department store here on a clearance sale, and it was a great deal. They were I paid a little over $20 for both of these kits. They're snap fit kits. And I really didn't think, a whole lot of them, really. I thought I'd get around to taking a look at them eventually, and just wanted to kind of have them kind of thing. And so I decided the other night to go dig these out, and I think I'm going to go ahead and do a review and build of this little guy right here, the 1000 Classic Enterprise from Polar Lights. Now I started doing a little research looking around on the internet, and it turns out that this model is quickly getting a nice little reputation of being one of the more accurate versions of the model that's on the market without buying add-on parts. As we are familiar with the 18-inch AMT kit, there are several inaccuracies in that kit, and if you wanted to build it as either some of the earlier versions, such as the first pilot ship, the second pilot ship, or the regular production ship, or even the ISS Enterprise, there were some missing parts that you had to go and find elsewhere if you wanted to be fully accurate with it. Well, this cool little kit here includes not only the decals and the markings for the alternate ships, but also the parts as well. And so that's kind of a nice little thing. It is a snap fit kit, and supposedly no glue is required, but we all know that usually when there's glue or a model involved, there's gluing of some type if you want it to hold together over a period of time and to get a nice tight fit on the parts. So we'll kind of see how that goes as we assemble this thing. And but we've got a nice little box here, great artwork. This is actually a painting of the Enterprise that someone has done. It's a very, very nice picture. Same thing on this side. And on the bottom you have actual photographs of the ship as built in one of the different versions, being the second pilot, first pilot, and regular production ship. And so let's take a look at what's under the lid of this thing. Start off with the instruction sheet here. Okay, so what we see here is we've got A1, B1, and C1, and if we look over on the sidebar here, we've got A representing the regular production series starship, B first pilot version starship, C second pilot and mirror universe starship. So this guide basically takes you through this and shows you that, okay, if you're doing the saucer section here on the top and you want to do the regular production series, you use the parts listed in the A1 section here to be accurate to that model. If you're doing either the first pilot or second pilot ship, you use the parts listed in B1 and C1 down here, and also the mirror universe ship, because the parts are actually different, the bridge being a little different. I think that would be all, but on this particular part of the model, but yeah, these part numbers look the same except for these bridge and lower sensor dome pieces, so there's some differences there in the saucer section. As you go to the next section here, you've got differences in the warp nacelles as far as the actual nacelle itself, and then the end caps, being the earlier version of the ship had basically painted domes here with a kind of a gold spike thing that stuck out on the front. I guess that represented part of the internal mechanism of the engine or something like that. But you do have differences in the warp nacelles, and so you have to follow along here to get that correct. The same thing here with the engines mounting onto the secondary hull. Differences in the deflector dish, depending on which version you're building. And on the reverse side, we've got our decal placement guide, which is very nicely detailed, nice up-close shots of it, so you can see exactly where everything goes. The ISS Enterprise here, the one we'll be doing, it's got a complete, top, side, forward, rear views of the ship so that you can place everything accurately. Now, on the original episode of Star Trek Mirror Mirror, the mirror universe ship, the ISS Enterprise, you never really get to see a very good look at that. There's a few shots, and the beginning sequence where the Enterprise flip-flops back and forth, where we see it change from the regular Enterprise to the ISS Enterprise. You actually saw the port side of the ship in that shot, and if you pay attention to Star Trek, you'll notice that you very, very seldom see a port side shot of the ship, and the reason for that is that the actual studio model, the 11-footer, was never finished on the port side. It was just a basic flat, bare panel, and there were some access panels that they had there to get inside to work on the lights and things like that. But to achieve that look or that shot on the episode Mirror Mirror, they basically reversed the film and put backwards markings on the ship, so that when it flip-flopped the other direction, you were actually looking at decals that were reversed in real life but looked correct on the screen, and gave the illusion that you were looking at the right side of the ship or the starboard side. So that's kind of interesting. Let's move on to some of the parts here. We've got the saucer section. Now this saucer is what we call a smoothie, where there are no grid lines on the top, and that's kind of another long-standing debate. I've had a look at some of the some pretty rare pictures of the studio model just prior to when they disassembled the thing for doing the restoration on it to represent the way it now appears at the Smithsonian. And on the photos, it shows a definite grid line that was on top of this saucer section. It's very faint. The lines are very thin. They're not engraved into the surface, and they're not raised on the surface. They're actually just done on the top of the surface with possibly maybe even a pencil. And you basically have the grid lines extending out, and then these concentric circles that get smaller and smaller and smaller towards the center. And again, they're not very noticeable, and certainly at the low resolution that we used to see the Enterprise on the old television sets, you didn't see that, or if you got a very slight glimpse of it, you weren't quite sure what you were looking at. And there's also been debate about what those grid lines actually represent. Do they represent hull panel sections to, make the shape of the entire hull here, or were they some type of a deflector or sensor grid? Nobody really knows for sure, but I can tell you that they were definitely there. On this build here, we're not going to worry about any of the grid lines. We're going to go ahead and do the regular paint work on this, a little bit of weathering, and that kind of rust line or wear belt that you see around the leading edge here on the high resolution images of the Enterprise. And so that's how we'll be doing this. Now this is kind of nice that you've actually got a separate part here for the bridge, so you can do the different versions as I mentioned. You've got separate parts here for your navigation marker lights, which makes that easier to paint in place without trying to paint and not blob paint onto your other surface. Keep that real nice and sharp. Same thing here with the dorsal fin cap, separate part on this model, which is nice. On the flip side here, we've got the 3 concentric rings that should be there, and we've got these kind of triangle shaped pieces here underneath of the saucer that are supposed to be there. Now there's another little thing about those, and that fact is that according to some of the information that's out there now, these were actually meant to represent landing gear on the bottom. They're landing gear covers that are on the bottom side of the saucer. Since now it's been kind of revealed that even as far back as the original series, they planned on, or that there was a provision for the saucer to separate from the secondary hull in the case of an emergency, and supposedly these are some type of a landing gear should the ship or saucer have to do some type of a planet landing, and it does make sense. They do look like they could be that, so kind of a long-standing mystery of what those were. Now here, one thing that I don't like is that they've gone and put the Star Trek patent pending or whatever Paramount Studios thing here embossed on the bottom side of this. That's going to have to be sanded off. You don't want that there on the bottom of the model. So other than that, the fit is very, very nice. Just kind of lightly pressing it together without cleaning any of the burrs or anything off of it. It fits really, really nice. So I'm kind of enthusiastic about this one, that it might not be so bad to work with. And I like the scale of it. It's big enough where you'll be able to see all the markings very clearly in the details, but it's not going to take up a huge amount of room to display it. And speaking of that, I'm going to need more shelves in here if I keep building all these models. But anyway, that's a nice piece, and I'm really happy with what I saw when I took a look at that the first time. I'm not going to open this right now, but these are the clear parts that come with the model. And a nice little touch here is that they've gone in and you do get the clear Bussard collector caps, the caps that are on the ends, the forward ends of the Warpnacelles, so that you can either paint those, or you can, if you decided you want to do some type of a lighting setup with this, you don't have to go out and buy aftermarket clear domes. I never understood why the AMT kit, the 18-incher, didn't come with clear domes, so you had the option to work with instead of going out and buying aftermarket stuff. And the other nice little touch they did here is they wrapped it in some nice protective foam paper, which I can't tell you how many times I've bought a model and opened it up to find that my clear parts have been just kind of thrown in there on top of everything, and you know, all the jostling around and everything has caused all kinds of scuff marks and, you know, scratches all over them. And sometimes you do want to scratch them up or make that frosted look on some of the parts, but sometimes you don't. So these are already protected, so you've got nice clean parts to start with. And that's another nice little extra touch that Polar Lights has done. Now this parts bag here shows you some of the optional parts that we're talking about. Now here you can see we've got the larger deflector dish and the smaller one from the regular production. The pilot and second pilot ships, and some of the early regular production shots of the ship, well, you saw this larger deflector dish and then the smaller one. You've got even the shuttle bay doors, the hangar bay doors here in the back on the original first scene version of the ship. This area here was just smooth. There were no descending lines, like kind of segments on the back of those doors. And then you have the regular version that does have the segments there. And you've got the warp nacelle caps at the rear here, which there were some differences in those as well. The first version being that there was kind of a rectangular shape here sticking up in the center. The second pilot version, where no man has gone before, just as the ship is entering into that barrier thing, if you see the rear shot of it, you'll see it had these kind of vent-looking appearance on it. And then the regular production with kind of the little ball there in the center. Well, even the regular production version here, they've got the ball molded separate, so that now you'll be able to paint those two parts separately, since the cap itself was usually a dark gray, and then the ball would be a lighter color, and it makes that a little easier to paint that. So that's nice. And then you've got the display base parts here, and you've got the little manifolds that go on the warp engines. And I can see there's more than normally needed here for an assembly, so there must be some differences in those according to which version you're building, and I'll find out about that when I get into the actual assembly of this. And so yeah, they've got some nice parts here. And let's see, let's take a look. Okay, we've got the secondary hull, and the secondary hull is all smooth. There's no window outlines of any kind, no type of lines on it at all. So when you lay your decals down on this, they're going to lay down on there nice and smooth. And again, we'll see what kind of gap work we have to do when we mount the engines and some of the other parts here, and we'll get those all filled in really nice. Now up on the leading edge of the dorsal area here, the neck underneath of the saucer, this area is actually supposed to be painted a darker gray than the rest of the hull as well. And you can see that they've put a little line in here now, like molded that feature in, so that'll make for a nice line to guide for your tape when you go to paint this thing. And here we see the deflector dish assembly, or sub-assembly. The deflector dish sits in front of it. Here we look and see that these rings that were in there, to be correct, the first one, the outermost one here, should be slightly raised more than the rest, and it is in this case. So they've gone and cleaned that up really nice. And the mold that they did on this is really, really high quality. These rings are very, very thin, and they are exactly proportional as they should be. So they've gone and made a really nice piece with that as well. And okay, and here's a very interesting thing that I noticed right away when I opened this box. And I'll let you have a look here. Normally, to build an Enterprise model, you're familiar with this, that you get two sets of halves to build your warp engines. And this model here had 8 total pieces, and I thought, well, what's going on with that? Well, I took a look, and sure enough, we're going for accuracy again. Let me find the right parts here. Okay, The top one here represents the regular production ship that we saw, the later versions of the ship, where you had this inset here on the inside edge of the warp nacelle that had a gray painted background with a silver type grill work plate over the top of that, extending from the front to the rear, and then of course a little manifold piece that goes over top. And that's kind of a known feature of the ship. And you have here this earlier version where there's no there's just this gray background, and there's no metallic grill work over the top of it. And I went back and took a look at some of the early shots of the ship, and sure enough, those weren't there. Um, so they've gone ahead and they've reproduced that as well. So you get two completely different sets of warp nacelles to make your model perfectly accurate. So again, a great little touch that they added in on this kit. I'm liking this thing more and more as I go along. That could all change when we put it together, but we'll see. So here we've got our decal sheet, and the decal sheet is basically the same sheet that you see with the round 2 repop 18-inch version. Much more detailed sheet than what we got in the original AMT kits. You've now got all your window markings, your different markings all over on the ship, the registry numbers, you know, things to make the model look a little bit more detailed. And we've also got our ISS mirror decals here, which I'll be using those. And they look really crystal clear. They look really, to me, they look really in scale with the model. The font work on it's really nice, accurate. So this should be a nice little extra touch here to put on the model when we're finished up. And so yeah, as I'm taking a look at this thing, I'm really getting pretty excited about putting it together. May even decide to do the Klingon version of it afterwards. So anyway, we've been pleasantly surprised with this one so far. So again, we have the 1000 Classic Enterprise from Polar Lights. In the next video here, I'll be starting the buildup of this thing, and we're going to start with test fitting our parts as usual, and looking for gaps and things like that, and doing some prep work, cleaning up all the burrs, doing the initial assembly, and giving any more thoughts that I find or things that I find here along the way. Little tips I can give you if you decide to build one of these on your own, and I hope you do. That's what these videos are all about. So tip of the hat to the people who followed along. Thanks for the great comments. Made a lot of new friends along the way. It's really been a lot of fun. We're going to keep this puppy rolling. So I hope we'll see you on the next video. Until then, happy modeling.